Hi, everybody. Welcome to the L3 AMA. I'm an L3. My name is Matt Karr. I'm from Tennessee. I've been doing this judging thing for 10-ish years now, somewhere in that neighborhood. Been doing a bunch of different events all over the place, from our local stuff all the way up to Grand Prix. Have judged multiple Star City Opens, including most recently, for the head judge part, the Indy team event that happened this past March. Figured a lot of you are brand new, don't really know kind of how big event judging works, and having someone here help answer some questions that we have from the audience. If you have any questions, I'll be able to answer most of them, hopefully, but we'll see what we got. So if anyone has any questions, we'll go ahead and just start going around the room. Just when you do ask a question, especially if you've never met me before, please introduce yourself, because most of us do have name badges, but some of them are illegible for these old eyes. So, all right, who wants? All right.
Hello, I'm Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy.
I don't know no one. That's very good. But how long did it take you to become an L3?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
That's a very, very loaded question.
So the question is, how long did it take me to become an L3? So I actually started the process of becoming an L3 in 2018. And then I was going to I finished my test in February, got all my stuff in. Beforehand, it was a significantly longer period of time. You had to be an L2 for at least a year. You had to submit a self-review. You had to get 2 recommendations from an L3, 2 separate L3s going over the, at the time, 9 qualities for being an L3. You had to judge a bunch of events and get, at the time, what was called the team lead check, which was working as a team lead on day 2 of a Grand Prix. All of that takes a lot of time just to begin with. With that, so got it all in, got my test done. My panel, which was the final interview process you get, it tends to take somewhere between 2 and 4 hours. You're interviewed with 2 to 3 other L3s in the room. That's effectively a thesis defense, and your thesis is, I should be an L3. They say no, and you have to go from there. Mine was scheduled for GP Louisville, which was March 2020. Oh. Yep! So with that, so as all of you know, what happened during March of 2020, eventually we got it to the point during the L3 process. About a year before that, we switched over to Judge Academy. That delayed some stuff. COVID delayed some stuff. So it took me 2018 to 2020, yeah, that November is when I L3'd, on my 33rd birthday, actually. So that was a weird Saturday. But we finally figured out a way to accept how L3s were doing, and because of COVID, we did finally get a video process there. So mine was in the morning with 2 L3s from Spain. So that was a really fun time of us trying to coordinate actual times. But the end of that, birthday present to myself was being L3.
What was your most challenging large event and why?
Oh, God. There was a number of them. A Cincinnati event 6 years ago, which was one of the first big, huge ones, was extremely challenging because we had a cap of 800 and we had 1,100 for a venue that fit 900.
There was no cap. That was the problem.
Right. Well, yeah, that was the venue was capped at 900 because we couldn't fit anyone else, but they kept registering people. So we ended up having to get a second room. I was running side events and logistics at that event. Logistics are very challenging when you're trying to just cram in as many people as possible and still more. So we ended up not taking too many delays. So that was overall one of the most challenging events. The team event that just happened in Indy was also extremely challenging because it was our first one in team back from our COVID break. It was also the first one that we were running hybrid melee, and Companion does not enjoy team events at all. So we couldn't rely on Event Link or anything else that people were somewhat used to. So there was a lot of back-end challenges for that. The other weird challenging one was a GP in Memphis a number of years ago, which our head judge was caught in an ice storm behind an overturned semi-truck and got into town 7 a.m. And the event started at 9. So that was a really interesting, fun time as like half the staff was stuck on the highway. So yeah, those were the those are the ones that come to mind as the most challenging, just trying to deal with. Mm-hmm.
So aside from March of 2020,
Yeah.
what was the most challenging part of becoming an L2 and then an L3?
So an L2, the hardest part of getting an L2 was getting my steak the night before. And we'll go into that here in a minute. So that part, long story short, I spent a really long time at Chili's waiting on my food, as my food was given to other people. So the L2 part wasn't terribly challenging. L1 to L2 happened for me in about 3 months, but I hit it really, really hard. But for that, going from L2 to L3, getting the team lead check was the hardest part, was a very hard part because there's a lot of people going for it, but most Grand Prix only have 1 or 2 slots available to do it because they obviously want to make sure that the big day 2 for it, that is deciding, thousands and thousands of dollars prizes, has their best foot forward. So there's typically very few slots. And also there's a limited number of Grand Prix that you can get to or get on. So in general, in the before times, you had about 40 Grand Prix worldwide. The US typically had about 15 to 20, give or take. So that's only 15 to 20 chances for everyone trying to gun for the same thing. And this is candidates all over. So that part was extremely challenging. The other one is the L3 recommendation, because you're having people do a very in-depth review on you that are basically, at the time, were not compensated at all and didn't have any effect on them. So you kind of had to email back and forth and try to do that. For those looking to go from L1 to L2, one of the big challenging things right now is just getting that experience. That's partly why we have the mock tournament here. Getting that competitive experience for you, seeing how things work from on paper to in person, and kind of how you gauge how to apply the IPG, how to make the fixes happen. So that part can be the more challenging stuff on just trying to figure out how the IPG works for you. Because there's been a number of changes, and a lot of us haven't really done competitive events in the last 2.5 years. Obviously, we've gotten some back in the last 4 or 5 months, so that's been helping a little bit for you all. But that's the big thing, is just kind of the experience and the application of knowledge on the IPG is going to be the hardest part.
So, as you are the progenitor of nearly a third of the conference here today,
Yeah, that sounds right.
what advice would you give another judge who also wanted to foster a positive and growing community?
Okay, so for those who are unaware, obviously I'm the L3 in Tennessee, and I've made a lot of judges. We are traditionally, at this point, like half of an event whenever we go. We did Command Fest Richmond, and the Tennessee crew was like legitimately more than 30% of the entire event, which is pretty insane from a small town of 30,000 people. With that, to get back to your actual question, trying to foster a positive environment is just be a good example and be friendly to people. Show them how much fun this actually is. Like, the big thing is trying to foster the community. You want to be a positive person. And, like, a little bit of, like, pushing and bullying is fine. But, hey, come on out. There'll be a lot of resistance for people coming to do this. As you've all known, you've kind of taken your first call. You know how it feels when you're, hey, I'm just kind of alone. Make sure that you're giving them that support that they need. And just show them how much enjoyment you get out of it. Like, there's times that can be frustrating. There's times that it can be rough. But there's also a lot of times that it's a lot of fun. Like, there's a number of people in this room that are, amazing friends that I met basically through judging, that I've known now for a decade or more, that, like, they're some of my best friends in the world. And that's kind of the thing you have to foster there, is make sure you have a positive environment, make sure you bring that positivity with you, and make sure that you're trying to bridge any gaps that you have with people. One of the things I found is a lot of judges are extremely introverted and socially anxious. So it's really hard to get out of that comfort zone of just like, I don't want to talk to anyone. Because for some people, that's very draining. Being extroverted helps a lot, or at least faking extroversion. Just kind of extending that branch to open up first for them, and then they'll kind of follow that way, just to kind of be able to make that initial connection.
Actually, I have a follow-up.
Yeah.
So that question is kind of pertaining to fostering judges. How do you foster a local community?
So basically the same way. You do need some kind of buy-in with your store or your local event. But it's basically all the same thing is make sure that it's a positive environment, make sure you're being helpful and friendly, get some people together, invite them out for extracurriculars that aren't just at the shop too. Like if you're trying to go get food, be like, hey, friends, we had a good time playing this Commander game. Do you want to go grab something to eat? Or like, I'm thinking about dinner here. Just kind of like offhand invites help a lot with that. Making sure that whatever environment you do, you have set standards that people want to be there. So that's making sure that things are friendly, making sure that things are fun. Anytime you're hanging out with people, you're trying to do kind of your best face as you can. And as people enjoy themselves and are happy, they'll start naturally gravitating that way. Like I said, the part of the TO or your store buying into it is the TO also needs to make sure that if things are extremely negative, that they don't brook basically bigotry. So try to make sure that it's a positive and welcoming environment from the store itself. If you don't have that, it is a lot of fun. And you kind of have to be your own pseudo police on the play groups. And that store may not be the place to actually start it. Be that place to initially get the people interested, and then you actually take your ball and go somewhere else.
For larger tournaments, what's like a expected? Sorry, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
What's like an expected, I guess, judge to game ratio that you would deem as a good ratio?
Okay, so yeah, one of the things that we actually do look at staffing is a judge to player ratio. A very, very, very good one is one judge to roughly 25 players. That is insane, and you're just like, yeah, this is great. The traditional one you get is typically about 1 to 40, is about the average that you mostly get. That gets a little stretched, especially if you're in a local event or anything like that. Large events can kind of fudge those numbers a little bit more, just because you have just how tournaments work. You don't always need everyone all the time. So there's different parts of a tournament that ebb and flow with the amount of calls you get. Like the very beginning of a round, you're going to get a lot of calls for people not being in their seat or something going wrong, or judge, my match isn't here, or my phone's not working, or something like that. Through the middle of the round, so at 30 minutes or 25 minutes till time, calls are basically just non-existent. You'll get a couple of rules questions, a couple of bathroom breaks. And then again, at the end of the round, everyone's trying to get everyone finished with their matches so we can turn the round over, start the next round, and try to make it as smooth as possible. So you kind of have this big, up and down kind of cadence to an event that changes how many people you can typically have. Local events are a little bit off on that cadence just because people mess up a lot more, and it's just you, so things can back up a lot more. So if you're doing a local event, 1 to 30-ish is kind of where I would like to be at the worst. But larger events, typically it's about 1 to 40. You can stretch it to be about 1 to 50, but until you get over 1,000 people, that's really about as thin as you want to be.
You could change anything in policy, what would it be?
Get rid of HC. HC is the absolutely worst designed thing ever. It is awful. The other actual real answer is the big issue we have between deck list and deck problem. There's a lot of issues with kind of corner cases on if you have a deck list and a deck problem at the same time, what ends up happening, how do you apply it, and certain things that can be fixed. It's a deck list issue, but you can fix it as a deck problem and vice versa. I think they should be combined back together, and we just have a downgrade for deck problems a little bit differently than what we have now. But HC needs to go out. Bye.
How would you change Chalice of the Void administrators?
Unfortunately, Chalice of the Void, not really. That part is a very corner case scenario, and the policy works most of the time. Chalice is really annoying with that, and I don't think it's worthwhile to have a specific call out for Chalice in the policy, because we try to keep the document as tiny as possible. That's partly why I don't like HCE, because the thing is 6 pages of the IPG. But yeah, you're going to handle it as mistrigger policy as it is, which sucks a lot, and it's really unfortunate. But until we can find a way to carve out a specific example, I don't think it's worthwhile because for mistriggers we don't really have that other than like symmetrical effects. And I think at a certain point, missing your chalice trigger or anything like that is going to be caught with either cheating or just getting yourself warned out of the tournament.
They say the best time to do something was yesterday.
Mhm.
The second best time to do something is right now.
Mhm.
If you had to go back as a beginner judge, what would you try to do now?
Oh, try if I was just like starting out, what's the first thing for it? Have fun. Like there was a lot of stress initially to go from L1 to L2 when I was there, and that was personal stress for it. So I burnt out really, really quickly for a lot of it, and I hit events really, really hard initially, and then had to take a pretty solid break due to work, and then came back and hit them really hard again. So don't do that. Enjoy yourself. Don't make judging an end goal or like try to turn it into anything other than a fun time. It is still work. Don't get me wrong. It is a lot of work and can be very stressful at different times. But take it a little bit easier and just make sure that everything was ready. I was going from point A to point B in a more leisurely way. Make a little bit stronger friendships when I was at L1 coming on up, and just making sure that you have travel buddies and people that actually want to talk to you and stuff like that. So yeah, just take it a lot more easy than I did. So going that quickly should not be a strive to be an example, and it's more of a red flag than it is an accomplishment. At least I'm fully convinced now. Mm-hmm.
I'm Joel. I guess my question is, how would you go about developing more judge friends and judge networking?
So similar to what Chris had said, it's the same thing. Is be approachable and do the approaching itself. Like there's a lot of times, especially if you're in an event, you all there have something very much in common. You're judging. You can come up and just be like, hey, I'm Matt. I haven't seen you before. I'm from place. Obviously I'd be like, hey, I'm Matt. I'm from Tennessee. How long have you been doing this? It's really easy starting off with that. And you've seen interesting calls. One of the other favorite ones is, when was the last time you drank water? Some of the experienced judges laugh on that one. And just kind of like asking questions about people. Just learn to start talking to people, and then you have already kind of a built-in icebreaker setup. When you work larger events, you're going to be assigned to a team doing a particular task, and you're going to be around those people more often than not during the event. So it's really easy to start talking to them, go out to eat with them, and as you see them multiple times over the course of a period of time, you just kind of naturally start making friendships, as long as you're approachable and aren't being a shitbag. Really, like, be a good person helps a lot there.
With the return of RCQs, what advice, if any, could you give on negotiating compensation with local stores?
Value your time. Do not undervalue your time. It's the store. You are providing a service to the business, and you are providing your time and your labor. Value it appropriately. Do not undersell yourself. Do not undercut yourself. If you have a particular number and that store doesn't meet it, walk. There's been a lot of judges over the years, back in the old version of the RCQ system, which we call PPTQs, and now the new one. Costs are high comparatively. Like doing this 2 years ago would have been much different than doing it now. Costs for gas and travel and all of that are much higher than they have been. Value your time, value your costs. Don't take in a loss for an event. Absolutely not. Like if it's going to cost you more to get there and do it, don't do that. If there's a job that's going to pay you less than minimum wage after all of that, don't do that. Like value your time appropriately and get compensated for what you do. You are a skilled professional doing a skilled professional job. So make sure you focus on that and make sure you understand that and take that to yourself.
To kind of expand on that, now I understand that, again, us in the Tennessee group are a little privileged in this, so we may have a little bit more bargaining power than the average area. But try to get on good terms with the other judges in your area, and if there is a store trying to undercut you, talk to the other judges and get them to not work for that store either if they can afford to not to.
Yeah. Everyone wins when we value our time appropriately and you value your skills. So don't undercut yourself.
Our skills
Yeah. So, because that's the other side. Is like, obviously every business is going to go for the lowest bidder, but you don't have to be the lowest bidder. You know, if it doesn't hit your number and you're just like, no, that's fine, pass it and move on. Like, I can't stress enough how much you should value your time, because that's one of the things that some of these jobs can take a long time that you're just not expected to get. Like, a 6-round tournament can run somewhere between 9 to 11 hours, depending on how long top 8 takes. And like, doing that for a box is just like a normal draft box or whatever, just it's not worth it at all. So negotiate your time accordingly. You are providing a service. Make sure you impress upon any TO that you are providing a service that they really can't get anywhere else, and that players kind of expect, you know, a high quality service of them. Also, make sure that when you do take the job, you do deliver on them. You know, you are providing a high value for them, and making sure that the event is run cleanly, and, you know, at least as fun. Joke with the players, have fun, enjoy yourself. And if you're enjoying yourself, the players will start enjoying it too. Like, I constantly joke with any of my locals, just have fun, because like, that's what we're doing it after all. Like, even if we're here, we're certainly not doing it for overall a paycheck. No one's going to retire off of their judging income by any means. So yeah, you should see the pay. Still not there.
In this economy,
Also that.
I can retire if I live till next year.
Yeah. I think we have one more question, and then I think we're going to get out of here if anyone has a final question for today. All right. Yeah, Fran.
I'm interested in pursuing L2 at some point down in the future.
Cool.
But I prefer local level events.
Cool.
And I'm not sure if larger events are for me.
Cool.
Are there any official and unofficial expectations of becoming an L2?
So in the before times, I would have said yes. Now, no, not really. The big things that we have expectations for an L2 to do is run a competitive event. That we can hand you a competitive event, go, here you go, and trust you that you will get the vast majority of things right. You understand how an event works, you understand how to apply policy most of the time, and you understand how the rules work the majority of the time. And we're talking like 85%. So that's the expectation we have, that you can effectively, now that RCQs are back, that can you run an RCQ reasonably sized 30-ish by yourself and have no problems. That's basically the baseline expectation. If you can do that, it doesn't really matter. What I like to remind people is the level system is a floor of ability. It's a baseline for where you're at. It's just the normal competencies that you've been tested on and what we expect from that. But your growth potential it's a floor, not a ceiling. So your growth potential can be quite wide. So like an extremely proficient L2 will have a big gulf between someone who just turned L2 that doesn't quite have the same experience. So like the gulf in ability will be high comparatively for that, but don't let that stop you, because at the end of the day, all of you are expected to be able, at L2, are expected to be able to run a competitive event. And there's no like regional expectation. You're not like, hey, I'm an L2, that means you have to go to a Grand Prix or anything else like that. That's nonsense is really the answer, as I'm sure Jeff can answer for that too.
Yeah. I was gonna like say an add-on. Like, I'm an L2 and I have been for like 5 years. There's a decent chance I never do a large event again. Like, the nice thing about L2, not to say that L1s can't do all those things, but it opens up a lot more room to like specialize.
Mm-hmm.
You can be the L2 who just like grows community and is really good at that. You can be the, RCQ, PBCQ, whatever CQ all-star. You can be the big event all-star.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have all these different paths you can go down, and as long as you can do the floor Matt's talking about, then like,
Yeah, as long as you have that baseline competency, you can kind of do whatever. I do encourage everyone to at least try to work a larger event to see if that's something that they enjoy or have fun with. Because one of the big things is just like, you don't quite get that community that you had without working the large events. Not, like I said, a number of people that I called my closest friends, I would never have met without going to these bigger events and traveling a little bit more. Plus, you get to see some stuff that you may not have, like, some events when Grand Prix start up again and whatever else, you might be able to go to things like Portland or New Jersey or Orlando or other places. Don't go to New Jersey. But like, there's other places you can go that you may not have been able to see, And you can kind of use that at, like, especially one of the things you can do is, spend a little bit of time in a place that you wouldn't have expected to be. And it's at least compensated while you're there. So, there's some big trips that you can take that you would just never see, and it's worth going. It's worth seeing new people and experiencing it. And especially with the large tournaments, you can also get a lot of foreign judges on over. So, for example, in Command Fest Richmond, that happened a couple of weeks ago, we had multiple judges from Brazil, Austria, France, the UK, and Mexico, and Canada as well. So, like, we had judges from 6 or 7 different countries for an event that had 20 people, 20 staff at it. Like, so, and that's different cultures that you haven't been able to see or anything like that. That, for the most part, you're not going to experience in your home. All right. Well, with that, we appreciate you all coming on out. I do hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you at whatever the next event is.